was like 2 years old, so the story is told. It was right around Christmas time. And they heard this music coming out of the hallway. And my grandmother said, "Who left the record player on?" I played my first concert when I was 6 years old in the first grade. I began to develop my style and my ear for music through junior high and high school. I participated in band, played the trombone and the drums in the band, but always piano, always playing concerts through high school.
The first time I met Doug, he was 15 years old, and he came into our recording studio and he wanted to make a record, and that's where we first got to know Doug.
The first time I met Doug Smith was when I was working at the old CALDWELL studios in the fall of '88. I just started working there, and it was my first week of recording. Don sent me back to work with this piano player that was just needing to cut some tracks, didn't know anything about him. And I got set up, and he came in, introduced himself, and sat down and started playing. And I was just blown away. I mean, I've never seen anybody just sit down and play that effortlessly before. We pretty much did all these tunes on one take. We might have started one or two over, but they were pretty much just heads up, you know, sit down and play the tunes.
I've been playing guitar since I was old enough to pick one up, you know, and that was, everybody asks, you know, do you play the piano? But no, I do not. That'd be like Michael Jordan's kid not wanting to play basketball, you know, it's understandable.
I've always told people, the Doug Smith that I'll always remember isn't the piano player Doug Smith, it's my father, Doug Smith. You know, my father had an outstanding talent which happened to be playing an instrument, and he happened to do it better than anyone else ever could, in my opinion. I'm a little biased. The Doug Smith that I'll remember, you know, was my father. You know, the memories that I take and hold most dearly to me is, you know, playing football and throwing a baseball, shooting guns, and, you know, things like that. Those are the memories that I hold, but, you know, it still does, you know, that's definitely a huge part of it, is the musical part, for sure.
Well, playing music, for me, then as in now, it made me different. It made me different than everybody else, you know, and it gave me something that that made me feel different than everybody else too. And all my friends enjoyed it. All my teachers enjoyed it. I mean, I've literally spent my life in music, playing music, creating music, recording music, publishing music, copywriting music. And so for me, it is my life, you know. I mean, I don't really have no other skill. I don't even want another skill, you know. So it's really been not only my life's work, it's been my only ambition in my life is to develop music too. So that's what it is. It makes me different. I like being different.
What really kind of cemented our friendship, when we did the live album, that was at the Allen Theater, and that was recorded the day after my dad's funeral. And I almost didn't think I was going to be able to do it. You know, I was telling my wife, you know, man, I don't know if I've got it in me to go in and do this. And you know, it's just, well, you know, your dad, you know, really wants you to go do this. You know, get back to work. And she was right. And I did it. And you know, both my brothers were in town, so they got to come. And I actually had the flu that day, as I recall. And we, you know, did the recording and, you know, the concert. It was a full concert. You know, there's about 850 people out there. And that was the first time that Doug had really opened up and started talking, you know, about the songs. And he was also talking to me. You know, he'd be making references. "We doing all right up there, Al?" You know, and there was something about that moment, that concert, and I mean, he played his butt off that night. And that was the thing about Smith. He was all in or all out. There's really no in between.
Howdy. Guess y'all are wondering where my hat is, aren't you? Well, I ain't got it. I got new music. I've got new duds, new boots, 9-foot Steinway, my favorite theater, my favorite people, my favorite engineer sitting up there in a booth, and my home school, the Red Raiders. What more could a guy want to document a live recording?
Doug on the stage by himself was really, I think, where he felt the most comfortable because then he could pace himself, play at his own tempo, change the tempo whenever he wanted, and just let the audience interpret.
I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard this a lot. You first meet Doug and you think, man, this guy's just some old tractor driving farmer guy from West Texas, you know, kind of gruff and rough and loud and boisterous and everything. And he sits down at that piano, and you would just never expect this music the way to come out of this guy, you know, this kind of rough and tumbly kind of guy. And there's just this beautiful music.
Doug had so much innate ability that that energy he had for life. When he played piano, he played hard. I mean, he slammed it. From the first day that I met Doug, he was always like that. You know, larger than life, and he talked louder than anyone else in the group. You know, Doug had his quiet moments, but for the most part, it was just he was having fun. He was enjoying doing what he was doing and utilizing this gift that he'd been given to play the piano unlike anyone else in the world. On the other side of things too, like he wrote the song Linda for his mother, and we recorded that, and that was the most sensitive thing you ever heard. So, you know, his music was definitely, I mean, his art tells you who he was. You listen to his music and that's who he was. But yes, he had power from the beginning. He killed it.
It was funny growing up because I never thought, like, I knew everyone's dad wasn't like that, but I didn't know to the extent. And I think even now I probably really don't know the full extent of like his talent. I knew I couldn't do it. I knew a lot of other people couldn't do it, but I really didn't know how he did it. And it was really just a God-given talent, you know, sit down at a piano and just, you know, listen to the wind, listen to the birds, look at something, you know, boom, get inspired, and, you know, 30 minutes later you have probably the greatest song I've ever heard, you know. So something like that's just, you know, it's a God-given talent. I don't know how he does it. I'll never will. So I'll never be able to do it. I think that is just, you know, that's a Doug Smith talent. You know, he had a lot of them, and the piano was a big part of that.
There was a guy named John Chambers that was coming in to work with me. He had been hearing my work and wanting to record with me. This the first time I'd ever met him was this day, and he's a film and television writer. And you know, we've been talking about wanting to get Doug's music licensed in movies and television, and it seemed like a good opportunity to have a little get together and kind of pick his brain, see what kind of opportunities we might be able to come up with. And anyway, the session went great, and Doug had the night before had chaperoned a co-ed sleepover, and you know, basically had to stay up all night, you know, making sure everybody behaved themselves.
It was early in the morning, 1:30 in the morning when I left here, and I guess I was exhausted, you know, arguably, but I had left here. You know, my home is only 15 minutes from here.
He was looking pretty sleepy, and I actually did tell him, you know, my last words to him actually were, "Hey man, why don't you go crash out on the couch?" And he's like, "No, I can make it home." He didn't make it very far, and you know, he fell asleep at the wheel, and you know, rest is history, so to speak.
on that road, 789 south, at 1:30 in the morning, there ain't nobody out there. So for the first hour, I was hanging upside down. I had my seatbelt on. I'm upside down now, and I can't figure out. My cell phone was from about here to your knee right there. But I couldn't figure out why I couldn't grab hold of my cell phone. And I kept thinking, well, I think I might have pinched a nerve, and it'll come back in a minute. I'll grab my cell and I'll call for help. I kept looking at my cell and looking at my cell. I couldn't grab it. I couldn't grab anything. I couldn't move anything, you know, and couldn't figure out why. So for the first hour, I just yelled like a stuck pig in the ditch, thinking that my voice, as loud as my mouth is, that it would get on the wind and drift, and one of these old farmers would hear me yelling. I knew it. After the first hour, nothing. Second hour, nothing. And then my vocal cords were shot, you know. And so I hung there for over 3 hours.
I can't remember what time we got called and actually answered the phone. I want to say it was maybe around 4 in the morning or something. Me and my wife, you know, get in the car and start heading into town, and she contacts the nurse, and the nurse is like, well, you're gonna have to be really strong for him. And you know, I saw my wife kind of doing this, and that's when we were learning that, you know, he's got some kind of a, you know, neck or spinal cord injury. We didn't know exactly what. I don't think they even knew exactly. There was always hope when he got to the hospital, because it was not a tear. It was just anybody's guess, you know, how much movement and ability he would get back. And of course, everybody was hoping and praying, you know, that it would all come back.
I think I was 11 or 12 years old. I'd just woken up. We were back at the farmhouse in Petersburg. And then we had one of my dad's best friends at the time was at the house, and I woke up and he's there a lot.
He broke it to us in the nicest way you can tell somebody that, you know, Dylan, your dad's been in a wreck. Well, okay. I didn't know how severe it was, you know, until, I guess, a few hours later.
After the accident, he was in the hospital a couple of days after the wreck, and he was fully conscious. The conversation, I'm not sure whether he started it or I started it, but it was about, the thing about his music is in his head. And if he never gets his hand back to play it, that music is gonna be done. And he's just gonna find people that he can talk to, and they can express his music, and he can put it forward. So from 2 days after that accident, I know that Doug had dug in already to go, okay, I'm gonna continue to do music.
You know, being younger, you didn't understand the magnitude of a spinal cord injury at the time. But, you know, once that set in a little while later, but at the time, you really didn't know.
You know, I think like most people, I was in disbelief and denial for a while, and knowing, you know, when I'd first heard that there was an accident, that he'd had the rollover, but he survived. And so I was just hopeful that, okay, this is a temporary thing, and if anybody can come out of this, then Doug can. Within the next, you know, hours and days after the accident, started hearing more about the actual extent of his injuries, and everyone was much more concerned.
It's so bizarre on spinal cord injuries, because I remember his arms and wrists were fine. He wouldn't have any problem moving his arms and wrists, but he couldn't move his fingers at all. I mean, it's a totally different set of nerves.
I would say mainly how I felt about all of it was scared to death, you know. But as the days go by, and as the physical therapy goes by, and as the occupational therapy goes by, and as you strengthen your body to do things differently than you did, then things begin to change, you know.
And through all this, though, he was still using some humor. That was one thing that was always inspiring to me with Doug through this whole ordeal. Now, he had dark days, don't doubt it for a second. I saw a lot of them myself, but he always managed to use humor in a way I don't know anybody else that could have.
From what I understand, and Doug was probably told early on that he would never be able to play again. And of course, he made his mind up at that time to come back full force and get back where he started.
There's no question that he had to do music. That was who Doug was. He had to do music. He loved music. That was Doug. So yeah, there was, I mean, after the accident, he had to do music.
Craig Hospital experience, that was a life-changing experience for us, not just Doug, but you know, Craig Hospital is designed around spinal cord injuries and head injuries. I mean, that's what they deal with there. And I mean, when you first start walking down the halls, I mean, you realize you're in a totally different place with a totally different set of rules.
What they're about at the Craig is not, they don't tell you you're going to walk again. They don't tell you you're not going to walk again. They don't ever, that never comes into play. What they teach you is they teach you how to live in a chair. They teach you how to transfer. They teach you how to shower. They teach you how to shave. They teach you how to eat. They teach you how to put on these apparatuses that enable you to do all of these daily functions, you know. And then the main thing that they do is they provide you with a shrink, which Dr. Gerber was my shrink, and he was great. He was great. What turned it around from being hellish, depressed, unbelievable depression, without really a lot of hope in my heart as to what was going to happen, he pretty much told me that if I was going to be a depressed person, a down person, an angry human being, that I would lose my wife, and I would lose my children, and I would lose my friends, and I would lose my career. And so I made a decision right then, right there, that I was not going to do that. And so then that's when, you know, the Phoenix was reborn, you know, and rose again from the western horizon. And I think God brings hope back into a faithful heart too, you know. And I was certainly asking Him for direction, begging Him for direction every day. And that's another thing that I was doing when I was in the ditch, is me and God got reacquainted very closely there in the ditch, and I've been closer to Him ever since. And in that regard, it's been a blessing too, you know.
It was cool to kind of get to pick his brain and kind of see how it works, but it was frustrating at the same time for him, because he was wanting to show me something and his body wouldn't allow him to do it. When you have the injury that he was an incomplete quadriplegic, which means you don't have complete use of your hands, which for a piano player, that's kind of a problem. So it was frustrating at times, because he was trying to tell me something, and he was so gifted at it that he couldn't just tell me how to do it. You know, he couldn't tell me how to play it like this. He couldn't tell me how to switch over and, you know, hit a lick like he would. He couldn't do it. Like, I have to show you, and physically I can't do that. So that part of it was frustrating. But then seeing how just musically, I mean, just listening to something and then picking up on little things that, I mean, that if me or you listened to it, we'd have no clue. We'd never even hear it was there. And then he would hear it, and then he could tell you what it was, and it was right every time. That part was amazing. That's still something that, one of the memories that I treasure more than anything else is, you know, those few times that we did sit down together.
I think even creatively, you know, he wasn't able to put it down like he did, but his mind, everything was still there. So it was more composing than it was performing. To have that kind of talent and be able to do that, you know, he's been able to put it down like that for so long and then not be able to physically get around it, you know, but that's tough, you know, obviously. But, you know, it ended up good. And he set a goal, you know, to record music again, and he did. I mean, and I had no doubt that he would. Other than the nurse that was on staff that morning, I was the first call. And I had kind of been his right-hand man for a while, you know. Lived in the area, and the call, and I knew it when I got the phone call. I was at work. It was about 9 in the morning, and it was Deb. Deb Fries was our nurse, and she was so great to Dad. We couldn't have done it without her. But answered the phone. It was silence, and I kind of knew. Something told me right there. I was like, oh man, and she just bawling. And there was really nothing said. I hung up the phone. I said, I'll be there in a minute.
I had gotten a telephone call from Doug, I think it was 3 days before that. And I had listened to the message and I was out of town, and I never did get back to him. And when I heard that it was too late to ever talk to him again, it broke my heart. And Doug in the message was talking about, let's get together and finish that up. And you know, my thought was, great, man, I can't wait to get back in the studio with Doug. And it was heartbreaking to know that we weren't going to finish that together. We're going to finish it, but it was heartbreaking. You know, it was inevitable. You know, he suffered so much, and you know, he's at peace now, and that's wonderful. But Doug just seemed bigger than life. He was that kind of guy, and for him to pass was really heartbreaking.
The whole experience of building the studio, all the music we made, I mean, that's something I'm going to cherish forever. I mean, it's hard to believe you know, having to let that part go, but I wouldn't trade having it for anything.
I just think it was important for him to remember everything, and especially the way that he passed, not as a tragedy, but really as a celebration of what he was able to accomplish. That was important for him. He didn't want people to seem like, oh, you know, poor Doug Smith had his talent taken away. It wasn't about that at all. It's a story of triumph, is what I think is really important for people to know about my dad and about the legacy that he left, and the legacy that's still there through his music.
When I play music, I feel euphoric, I feel perfect, I feel like an eagle in flight, I feel like heaven's gate opening. You hear people talk about out-of-body experience all the time. That's what it feels like to play music in front of people to me, because the place that I go mentally and spiritually and even physically, you know, is a different place than I live in everyday life. Playing concert music, especially music that I created, you know, that means something, that's the greatest feeling in the world.